My parents raged, "You're not the daughter I hoped for." Never, not once. My mother wished I had been aborted. I straightened my coat, declaring I would cease existing, and then departed. They later resurfaced when all their foundations crumbled, pleading for a reprieve I'd never bestow. The words were a surgeon's blade, precise and devastating, carving out a space inside me that used to hold hope. My own mother, through the phone, had just told me she wished I'd never been born. That singular brutal sentence didn't just break me, it vaporized everything I thought I knew about family, cementing decades of subtle neglect and outright dismissing my very existence. My world had always felt conditional, but in that moment, the foundation beneath me was gone. The air in the marsh that day was cold and damp, a heavy mist clinging to my waders, seeping into the wool socks beneath my boots. I could feel the squelch of mud beneath my feet with every careful step as I leaned over, collecting sediment samples from the murky water. The familiar scent of salt and decay, the cries of gulls overhead, this was my element. I was knee-deep in the important work I loved, miles, it felt, from the echoing disappointment of my past. Growing up in San Jose, I quickly learned that love, or at least my parents' version of it, was a transaction, a prize I could never quite earn. My younger brother, Daniel, was the golden child. Athletic, effortlessly charismatic, he was everything our parents, Eleanor and Robert, had dreamed of. He played varsity football, dated the homecoming queen, got into UC Berkeley on a partial scholarship. Every Sunday dinner was a quiet, almost reverent celebration of his triumphs while I sat at the far end of the table, utterly invisible, my presence barely a ripple in the perfectly orchestrated family tableau. I was just different. Bookish, introverted, my passions lay in the quiet mysteries of environmental science and wildlife conservation. While Daniel brought home trophies, I brought research papers, volunteer certificates from the local animal shelter, tales of rescued seabirds. Eleanor would glance at them with a polite disinterest that barely masked her genuine disappointment, a slight downturn of her lips that spoke volumes. Robert was worse, in a way, because he tried to hide it. He'd pat my shoulder with a forced smile, his eyes already drifting towards Daniel. "That's nice, honey," he'd mumble, before immediately turning to discuss football strategies or business. My father owned a successful commercial real estate firm, and from the time Daniel turned 16, he was groomed to take it over. Nobody ever asked what I wanted. They'd already decided my path didn't align with their vision, didn't fit the narrative they'd written for their family. Here's the thing, this kind of sustained parental favoritism, where one child is consistently elevated and the other diminished, creates a deeply complex psychological landscape. The golden child often carries immense pressure to maintain perfection, while the scapegoat internalizes a profound sense of inadequacy, often leading them to either desperately seek external validation or, in some cases, to forge a powerful, self-reliant identity in defiance of their early wounding. High school was tolerable because I found friends who genuinely saw me, who celebrated my quirks and my quiet intensity. College was freedom, a breath of air I hadn't realized I was suffocating for. I went to UC Santa Cruz for marine biology, funded mostly by scholarships and a small inheritance from my grandmother Agnes that Eleanor, to her endless frustration, couldn't touch. Those 4 years taught me I could exist without their approval, that my worth wasn't tied to their expectations. Graduate school reinforced it, hardening a quiet resolve inside me. By 25, I'd landed a position with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, focusing on coastal habitat restoration. The work was meaningful, the pay decent, and, honestly, I was damn good at it. I published papers, led field teams, secured grants. My supervisor, Dr. Hayes, even told me I had a future in policy if I wanted it. What I didn't realize then was how much of my drive was still a desperate, subconscious plea for their recognition. Daniel, meanwhile, graduated from UC Berkeley and joined Robert's firm. He married his college girlfriend, Chloe, in a lavish ceremony where I was relegated to the outer edges of family photos, a peripheral figure in a life I was supposed to be central to. They bought a house in Walnut Creek with Robert's help, a down payment gift I knew I'd never receive. I didn't resent Daniel, not really. He'd been kind to me in his own way growing up, defending me from bullies on the playground, helping with homework when our parents weren't watching, always with a hushed, conspiratorial air. The problem wasn't him. The problem was that in my parents' eyes, there was only room for one child to truly matter, to truly embody their aspirations, and it had never been me. The air would thicken with unspoken expectations whenever I was around them, a suffocating blanket of judgment. The breaking point arrived during Thanksgiving when I was 28. I'd been dating Alex for 6 months, a fellow marine biologist who worked for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. We were serious enough that I wanted him to meet my family, foolish enough to believe this time might be different, that perhaps, finally, they might see me. Dinner was at my parents' sprawling house in Midtown San Jose, the same elegant dining room where I'd spent countless holidays feeling inadequate, my contributions ignored, my very presence an afterthought. Daniel and Chloe were there with their newborn daughter, Lily, a sweet, gurgling bundle. My Aunt Sharon and Uncle Michael had driven up from Los Angeles, adding another layer to the crowd. Everyone gathered around the baby, cooing and passing her between arms while Eleanor orchestrated the meal with military precision, her expression tight with the effort of maintaining a perfect facade. Alex and I arrived with wine and flowers, a peace offering. Eleanor accepted both with a tight smile that never quite reached her eyes, a familiar chill in her polite acceptance. Robert shook Alex's hand with the perfunctory grip he reserved for people he didn't consider important, a dismissive flick of the wrist. Dinner conversation revolved, as always, around Daniel's recent promotion to senior vice president, Lily's latest preschool achievements, and Robert's ambitious plans to expand the business into Arizona. When there was finally a lull, a brief, fragile silence, I mentioned that my team had just secured a $3 million federal grant to restore wetlands along the San Francisco Bay Estuary. Eleanor slowly set down her fork, the clink echoing in the sudden silence. "That's taxpayer money, isn't it?" she asked, her voice flat. The entire table went quiet. I felt Alex's hand find mine under the tablecloth, a quiet squeeze of solidarity. "It's federal funding allocated for environmental conservation," I said carefully, my throat tightening. "The project will create jobs and restore critical habitat for endangered species." Robert scoffed, reaching for his wine glass. "Sounds like government waste to me." Daniel just closed a deal worth $40 million. Private sector, real growth, actual value creation. "It's different types of value," I tried to explain, my voice barely a whisper against the weight of their disapproval. Robert just waved his hand dismissively, his tone saccharine, the way you'd explain something obvious to a particularly slow child. "Money is money, sweetheart. You're almost 30. When are you going to get serious about your career?" Alex stiffened beside me, a tremor running through his hand. "She has a doctorate and leads a team of 12 scientists," he interjected, his voice quiet but firm. "That seems pretty serious." Eleanor's eyes flickered to Alex, a cold, dissecting gaze that held something akin to disdain. "You must be the boyfriend. The one who also works for the government." I saw Alex's jaw clench. "I'm a federal researcher, yes, ma'am." Eleanor's smile was thin, razor sharp. "How lovely. 2 people living off taxpayer dollars. Quite the power couple." Her voice could have frozen water solid. Sharon, my aunt, bless her heart, tried to change the subject, asking about Lily's first Thanksgiving, but the damage was done. I could feel the familiar, suffocating weight settling over me, the crushing awareness that nothing I did, nothing I could ever achieve, would ever be enough for them. This emotional invalidation, where parents consistently dismiss a child's passions, achievements, and even their core identity, is a subtle yet potent form of psychological abuse. It's a way of gaslighting their reality, making the child question their own perceptions and value, fundamentally undermining their sense of self-worth. Lily, however, at 5 years old, was oblivious to the tension. She tugged on my sleeve, her eyes wide. "Auntie, do you want to see my drawings?" I did. More than anything. They were beautiful crayon renderings of dolphins and sea turtles, vibrant and full of life. For a moment, watching her earnest little face, I saw a piece of myself in her pure, unadulterated curiosity about marine life. We made it through dessert before I announced Alex and I were leaving. Eleanor didn't try to stop us. Robert had already moved to the living room with Daniel to watch football, already back in his comfort zone. I thought that was it. I thought I'd go home, cry it off, and maintain the shallow, surface-level relationship we'd established, pleasantries during holidays, minimal contact otherwise. I'd stopped expecting more years ago. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare. Then Eleanor called 3 days later. I was in the field, knee-deep in marshland, collecting sediment samples, the cold water a constant presence around my shins, when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. Something, an insistent prickle of dread, made me check. You embarrassed us on Thanksgiving, Eleanor said without preamble, her voice a chill down my spine. Bringing that boy and flaunting your little government job like it's something to be proud of. I pulled off my gloves, my team working around me, blessedly unaware. I'm at work, Mom. Can this wait? No, it cannot wait. Your father and I have discussed this extensively. We're concerned about your life choices. My choices are fine. They're not. Her voice had the sharp, cutting edge I remembered from childhood scoldings, the kind that made my stomach clench. You're nearly 30, unmarried, working a job with no real prospects. You've wasted your education on a field that will never provide financial stability or social standing. The marsh suddenly felt very, very cold, the familiar comfort stripped away, replaced by an acute vulnerability. What exactly do you want from me? We want you to stop pretending you're satisfied with mediocrity. Daniel has built something real. You're chasing birds in swamps, she spat, her disgust palpable even through the phone. Endangered shorebirds in critical habitat zones, I corrected quietly, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. And I'm good at it. You're good at disappointing us. Eleanor's words were precise. Surgical. You've been doing it since you were 12 and refused to try out for cheerleading. Since you turned down that nice boy, Ben, whose father owns the car dealership. Since you picked bugs and animals over business school. My breath hitched. I'm a marine biologist. You're a waste of potential. Her voice rose, the careful control slipping, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. Do you know what it's like for me at the club? When Carol brags about her daughter, the attorney, when Susan talks about her son, the surgeon, what do I say? That mine is playing in mud for $40,000 a year? Something inside me crystallized, a tiny, hard shard of defiance. I make $73,000 plus benefits and I've published 14 peer-reviewed papers. Nobody cares about your papers. Eleanor was shouting now, her voice shrill and ugly. Nobody cares that you can identify some fish or count some birds. You're not the daughter I wanted. You never were. From the day you were born, I looked at you and knew you'd be difficult. I told your father we should stop at one. That Daniel was enough. I should have. She stopped herself, a ragged gasp, but I heard the unspoken words in the deafening silence that followed. You should have what? My voice didn't sound like mine, it was thin and reedy, fragile. Nothing. Forget it. Say it. Ice ran through my veins, a slow, freezing current. Finish what you are going to say. A long pause, then softer, almost a whisper, but infinitely more devastating. I should have made different choices. You've been nothing but a disappointment from the beginning. I wished I had never had you. Are you happy? That's how much pain you've caused this family. The world tilted around me. My team continued working, oblivious to the seismic shift happening in my personal universe. Someone laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. A heron flew overhead, its wings a blur against the gray sky. Okay, I managed to say, the single word feeling impossibly heavy. Okay, what? Her voice was laced with suspicion. Okay, I understand. Thank you for clarifying. Don't take that tone with me. You need to accept reality and make changes. Your father agrees. We've discussed cutting you out of any inheritance unless you get your life together. Go to business school. Find a real job. Marry someone respectable. Stop wasting your life on nonsense. I looked down at my muddy boots, at my field notebook filled with careful observations, at the water samples that would help determine restoration success. I thought about the grant I'd written that would fund 3 years of critical research, the interns I was mentoring, the entire delicate ecosystem I was helping to save. I need to go, I said, my voice eerily calm now. We're having dinner next month to discuss this properly. You'll be there. No, I won't. Excuse me? I won't be there. I won't be anywhere you are ever again. Eleanor laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. Don't be dramatic. I'm not. My hands were steady as I packed my equipment, a surprising calm settling over me amidst the chaos. You wished you had never had me. You think I'm a waste and a disappointment. You don't want the daughter I am. So, I'm going to make this easy for everyone. I'll stop existing for you. You can't just, I hung up. My supervisor, Dr. Hayes, was watching me with concern, his brow furrowed. Everything okay? Family stuff? I forced a smile that felt like a grimace. I'll be fine. I wasn't fine. Honestly, the raw sting of those words was a physical pain, like a fist clenching around my heart. I drove home in a daze, the familiar route a blur. I called Alex, and for 2 solid hours, I cried, the sobs racking my body until my throat was raw, my chest a hollow ache. He just held me, his steady presence an anchor in my shattered world. Then, I did something I should have done years earlier. I blocked Eleanor's number. Then Robert's. Then Daniel's, because I knew they'd use him as a messenger, a flying monkey in their emotional warfare. The next week, I changed my emergency contacts at work, scrubbed them from my social media, severing every last tie. When a Christmas card arrived weeks later, I returned it unopened. Daniel tried anyway. He showed up at my apartment 3 weeks after that brutal phone call, standing in the hallway, looking utterly uncomfortable and guilty. I almost didn't let him in. They sent you, I said through the cracked door, the suspicion in my voice thick. Nobody sent me. I came because you're my sister. His eyes were red, shadowed with a pain I hadn't seen before. What Mom said was unforgivable. I told her that. Dad too. They know they screwed up. I stared at him. They've been screwing up my entire life. This was just the first time they said it out loud. I know, Daniel's voice broke, a raw, ragged sound. I know. I should have defended you more. I was a coward, but please don't disappear. You're my sister. The thing about Daniel was that he genuinely believed this. He'd lived in a different house than I had, with different parents. His version of Eleanor was proud and supportive. His version of Robert was engaged and encouraging. He'd witnessed my mistreatment, yes, but he'd never fully understood it because it hadn't been his reality, had never touched him in the same visceral way. I love you, I told him, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. But I can't have them in my life anymore. And if you're going to be their messenger, I can't have you either. I'm not their messenger. I'm your brother who's scared of losing you. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You should have thought about that before you let them make me invisible for 28 years. I closed the door. He knocked for 5 minutes, a soft, pathetic tapping, before finally leaving. I sat on the floor of my apartment and cried until my throat was raw again, until I was utterly empty. Alex stayed through all of it, a quiet, steadfast presence. Even when I woke up crying at 3 a.m., even when I canceled plans because I couldn't face pretending to be okay, he understood what it meant to be judged for choosing passion over profit. January brought a job offer that changed everything. The Scripps Institution of Oceanography wanted me to head their new coastal conservation program. Better pay, more resources, a prestigious institution, and I'd be working with some of the best marine scientists in the country. It felt like destiny. I accepted. Within a week, Alex got a transfer to NOAA's Southwest Fisheries Science Center in Encinitas. We moved together to a small house in Carlsbad with a view of the ocean, close enough to my work near the coast, far enough from San Jose that running into family was impossible. The move itself was liberating. I packed up my apartment and realized how little I actually owned that connected me to my childhood: a few photos of Daniel and Lily, my grandmother Agnes's necklace, some well-loved books from college. Everything else was mine alone, untainted by memories of disappointment. Our new house needed work, but that made it perfect. Alex and I spent weekends stripping wallpaper, painting rooms in colors we chose together, planting native gardens that would attract local wildlife. Every improvement felt like a declaration of independence, a tangible act of building a life entirely on my own terms. This was ours. Nobody could walk through and judge it. Nobody could compare it unfavorably to Daniel's professionally decorated showcase. My team at Scripps was everything I'd hoped for: 15 researchers, 5 support staff, and a budget that let us actually accomplish meaningful work. My first project involved mapping eelgrass beds along the Central Coast and developing restoration protocols for degraded habitats. The data we collected would inform policy decisions affecting thousands of acres of marine habitat, truly impactful, lasting work. Dr. Maya Sanchez, a brilliant senior researcher, became not just a colleague but a genuine friend. She'd grown up in a similar family dynamic, the disappointing daughter who chose archaeology over law school. We'd share coffee in the lab and swap stories about family dysfunction, laughing at the absurdity of parents who couldn't see value outside their narrow, self-serving definitions. My mother once told me I was wasting my PhD, Maya said one morning, examining sediment cores. She said I should have become a paralegal like my cousin, because apparently spending my life uncovering human history is less valuable than filing legal documents. Did you cut her off? I asked, watching her face. Limited contact. I see her twice a year and let her believe I'm a teacher because it's easier than explaining what I actually do. She looked at me curiously. You went full scorched earth, though. That takes guts. I shrugged, a phantom ache in my chest. It was survival. Staying connected was slowly ending me. Do you regret it? I thought about that, truly delving into the churning complexities of my emotions. No. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that I didn't have the parents I deserved, the unconditional love every child needs, but cutting them off? That was the healthiest thing I've ever done for myself. Work filled my days with purpose. I'd arrive at the lab by 7 o'clock, spend hours analyzing data, reviewing grant proposals, mentoring graduate students who reminded me so much of my younger self. Passionate, uncertain, hungry for validation from someone who understood their calling. I gave them what Eleanor never gave me: genuine interest in their work, constructive feedback, encouragement that wasn't conditional on fitting someone else's vision. One student, Ben, came to me in tears halfway through his first year. My parents say marine science is a dead-end field, he choked out, his shoulders shaking. They want me to switch to engineering. I saw myself in his distraught face. What do you want? I asked softly. I want to study coral reef restoration. I want to spend my life helping ecosystems recover from human damage, but they say that won't pay my bills. Ben, I said, a firm, quiet conviction in my voice, I own my house outright at 31. I consult for state and federal agencies. I've published papers that have influenced international policy. Your parents are wrong about the field. The question is whether you're strong enough to prove it to them, to build your own definition of success. He stayed. Last I heard, he'd secured a prestigious fellowship studying Caribbean reef systems. His parents still didn't understand, but he'd stopped needing them, too. For the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for approval that would never come. I stopped justifying my existence to people who had already decided I wasn't enough. I built a life from scratch, surrounded by people who valued expertise over appearances, conservation over consumption. The work was extraordinary. I led a team of 20 researchers, secured funding from private foundations and government agencies, published papers that were cited hundreds of times, shaping conversations, driving real change. At 30, I was invited to speak at international conferences, my voice carrying further than I'd ever dreamed. At 31, National Geographic featured my work in a documentary about coastal restoration, a testament to the undeniable impact of what I did. The documentary changed things in ways I hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, strangers recognized me at conferences. Universities invited me to give lectures. My inbox filled with interview requests from science journalists and environmental podcasts. The visibility was uncomfortable at first. I'd spent my life being invisible, unseen, but I learned to use it strategically. Every platform became an opportunity to advocate for conservation funding, to highlight the critical work of my team, to demonstrate that environmental science was both meaningful and viable as a career. One interview question, though, stuck with me. A reporter from a science magazine asked, "What drives your passion for this work?" I almost gave the standard, polished answer about loving the ocean, about wanting to protect ecosystems for future generations. But something, a flicker of that old defiance, made me honest. I spent my childhood being told that what I cared about didn't matter, I confessed, the words raw but true. That studying living systems was frivolous compared to business or law. I do this work partly because it needs doing, but also to prove that the people who dismissed me were catastrophically wrong. Every restored wetland, every protected habitat, every policy I influence, it's proof that they didn't know what they were talking about, that their narrow worldview missed the true value of life itself. The quote appeared in the article, bolded, underlined, resonating deeply. I got emails from dozens of scientists sharing similar stories. Apparently, parental dismissal was a common origin story in conservation biology. We were a tribe, forged in the fires of being told we weren't enough. Alex proposed on the beach where we'd collected our first samples together, the Pacific breeze whipping my hair. It was a small ceremony, intimate, with only close friends. My colleague, Dr. Maya Sanchez, was my maid of honor. No family from my side. It hurt less than I'd expected, a dull ache rather than a searing wound. The ceremony took place at sunset on a quiet stretch of beach near our house. 20 people gathered on the sand, colleagues, friends from graduate school, Alex's parents and sister, who had welcomed me into their family without reservation, without question. His mother had cried when we told her about my parents, not with pity, but with a fierce anger on my behalf. "You deserved better," she'd said simply, her eyes blazing, "but you found it anyway." That takes strength most people never develop. I wore a simple dress, carried native wildflowers Maya had gathered that morning. No elaborate production, no drama, just two people who'd found each other in marsh mud and built something real, something profoundly meaningful. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, there was a moment of silence that felt weighted, heavy with all the unsaid things. Part of me had irrationally worried that Eleanor or Robert would somehow appear, would ruin this, too. But the beach remained peaceful, the waves providing soft background music, and we said our vows without interruption. Afterward, we had dinner at a local restaurant, full of drinks and laughter and stories. Alex's father gave a heartfelt toast about finding partners who challenge you to be better. Maya made jokes about our terrible field fashion sense, covered in dirt and grit. Nobody mentioned my absent family. It was, truly, the best day of my life. Our honeymoon was a research trip to the Florida Keys. 2 weeks studying marine iguanas and collecting data that would supplement our coastal adaptation models. We worked alongside local scientists, learned from indigenous conservation approaches, and spent evenings watching sea lions play in the surf, their joyful barks echoing across the water. Some people might have thought it was a strange honeymoon, but it was perfect for us. We were building our marriage on a foundation of shared purpose, and that felt more romantic than any beach resort, more real than any manufactured luxury. Professional success followed personal happiness. At 31, I was offered a position on California's Coastal Commission, advising on environmental policy, my expertise now sought after at the highest levels. A salary came with it, $140,000 annually, plus consulting fees that pushed my income well past what Daniel had been making at Robert's firm. I bought a house, not a McMansion in suburbia, but a beautiful Craftsman in Laguna Beach with native landscaping and solar panels, a 10-minute walk from the ocean. I'd saved aggressively, invested carefully, and paid cash. No mortgage, no debt, no one to answer to. The house had been built in 1924, weathered but solid. It needed updates. The electrical was ancient, the plumbing questionable, but the bones were gorgeous: hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, a fireplace with original tiles, a yard that backed onto a protected greenbelt where deer came to graze at dawn. In the evenings, Alex and I renovated it ourselves over 6 months. I learned to tile, to install light fixtures, to refinish floors. Every improvement was intentional: energy-efficient windows, low-flow fixtures, reclaimed wood countertops. We turned the backyard into a native plant paradise: California poppies, coastal sage, lupins that attracted butterflies, a small vegetable garden where we grew tomatoes and herbs. The day we moved in, I stood in the living room and cried. Not from sadness, but from the sheer, overwhelming weight of accomplishment, of self-creation. I was 32. I owned a house, my house. I had a career I loved, a husband who respected me, financial security I'd earned with my own sweat and intellect. I built it alone. Everything Eleanor said I'd never achieve, I'd exceeded, and then some. Sometimes I'd walk through the rooms and imagine what she'd say. Would she critique my furniture choices? Would Robert comment that the house was too small, not impressive enough? Would they compare it unfavorably to Daniel's larger, sterile place? Then I'd remember they didn't get an opinion. This house existed in a world they couldn't touch, a life they couldn't diminish. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had wanted financial success and social standing above all else. I'd achieved both, on my own terms, in a field they dismissed as worthless. Life was good, better than good. I had a husband who loved me, work that mattered, colleagues who respected me, and a home I'd built myself. The grief over my family faded to a dull ache I only noticed occasionally, usually during holidays. Thanksgiving that first year without them was strange, a quiet sense of absence. Alex's family invited us to Seattle, and I spent the day with people who asked genuine questions about my research, who complimented my contributions to dinner, who made space for me at their table without conditions, without judgment. His nephew, a bright-eyed kid, asked if I could help with his science fair project. His mother framed a photo of our wedding and hung it with the other family pictures, a simple act of inclusion that brought tears to my eyes. Christmas was harder, a deeper, colder ache. I kept thinking about the years I'd spent hoping this would be the holiday. My parents finally noticed me. The carefully chosen gifts opened with polite disinterest. The conversations where I was background noise, a ghost at my own family table. Alex found me crying on Christmas Eve, watching snow fall over the bay. Missing them? He asked, his voice soft. Missing what they should have been, I corrected, a fresh wave of tears. The parents I deserved. I'm not sad about losing Eleanor and Robert as they actually were. I'm sad about losing the possibility that they could have changed. They had 28 years to change, he reminded me gently. I know, I sniffled, pressing my face into his shoulder. But there was always this stupid hope that next time would be different, that they'd finally see me. Walking away meant accepting they never would. He held me while I grieved. Not for the people they were, but for the relationship we never had, for the phantom parents who only existed in my imagination. But mostly, life was good, better than good. Then, 5 years after I'd walked away, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, a San Jose area code. I almost didn't answer. I was preparing for a presentation to the state legislature, focused and busy, my mind already rehearsing talking points. Something, a faint tremor of unease, made me pick up. Hello? Is this Daniel's sister? A male voice, uncertain, unfamiliar. My stomach dropped. Who is this? It's Michael, your uncle. I got this number from your old college roommate. Took some digging. I sat down slowly at my desk, the papers before me blurring. Why are you calling? It's about your parents. Your mom especially. Look, there's no easy way to say this. She's sick. Cancer. Stage 4. She's been in treatment for 8 months and it's not working. The doctors say maybe 6 months left. The floor seemed to shift beneath me, a quiet, internal tremor. I see. And Robert, your dad, had a massive stroke 3 months ago. He's partially paralyzed. Needs full-time care. I stared at my presentation notes, not seeing them, my mind suddenly blank. That's terrible. Daniel's doing what he can, but there are complications. The commercial real estate market collapsed in their sector. Some bad investments, over-leveraged properties. Then the stroke meant Robert couldn't manage things. They've lost most of their assets. The house is mortgaged to the ceiling. Eleanor's treatment isn't fully covered by insurance. My mind raced, trying to process this sudden, devastating shift in their fortunes. Why are you telling me this? Michael's sigh was heavy, laden with desperation. Because they need help. Family help. Daniel's maxed out his resources. And Eleanor, she's been asking for you. Says she wants to see you before she dies. The woman who wished she'd never had me wanted to see me. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, just a vast, echoing emptiness inside. Tell her no, please. Michael's voice cracked, thick with emotion. I know what happened. Sharon told me about that phone call, about the things Eleanor said. It was unforgivable, but she's dying. She's your mother. She stopped being my mother when she told me I shouldn't exist. People say terrible things they don't mean. She's suffered for it. They both have. Losing you, it's haunted them. Eleanor cries about it. Robert, even after the stroke, he mentions you. They made mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting a birthday or missing a recital, I countered, my voice flat. What they did was deliberate cruelty over decades, a systematic erosion of my self-worth. Please, just think about it. They're at San Mateo General Hospital in San Jose. Room 412. Eleanor is there full-time now. They can't afford home care anymore. He hung up before I could refuse again. Alex found me an hour later, still sitting at my desk, staring at nothing, the world outside the window muted and distant. What's wrong? I told him everything, the words tumbling out in a rush, disjointed and raw. He listened without interrupting, his gaze steady, then pulled me close. What do you want to do? I don't know. The honesty felt strange, almost foreign. Part of me feels like I should visit. She's dying. But part of me remembers being 13 and crying because she forgot my birthday while planning Daniel's elaborate party. Remembers being 22 and having her tell me my graduation didn't matter as much as Daniel's engagement. You don't owe them anything, Alex said quietly, his voice firm. They chose this. You are a child who needed parents, and they failed you repeatedly. The fact that they're suffering now doesn't erase that. She's dying. Lots of people die, he continued, a dark, dry humor in his tone. Some of them are terrible parents. I almost laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. That's dark, but true. He kept my face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking my cheeks. I'll support whatever you decide, but don't go because you feel obligated. Don't sacrifice your peace for people who destroyed it repeatedly. I thought about it for 3 days. On the 4th day, I made a decision. I drove to San Jose alone, the familiar landscape blurring past me, each mile a step further into a past I thought I'd escaped. The hospital was depressing in the way all hospitals are, but San Mateo General had the particular grimness of a facility serving people who couldn't afford better care. I'd researched it: a county hospital, overworked staff, outdated equipment. Room 412 was in the oncology ward. I stood outside for 10 minutes, my hand hovering over the cold metal handle, before finally entering. Eleanor looked like a stranger. The vibrant, critical woman I remembered, all sharp edges and impeccable style, had been replaced by someone hollow and gray. She'd lost at least 40 pounds, her skin papery thin, her hair gone from chemotherapy. An oxygen tube ran under her nose, a constant hiss in the quiet room. Robert sat beside her in a wheelchair, the left side of his face drooping, one arm curled uselessly in his lap. They both stared when I walked in, their eyes wide with a mixture of shock and desperate hope. "Hello," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Eleanor made a sound, half sob, half gasp. "You came? Oh God, you came." I stayed by the door, unwilling to cross the threshold, to fully enter this tableau of suffering. "Michael called me. I'm so sorry." Tears ran down her gaunt face, carving trails through the dust of regret. "I'm so sorry for everything. I was wrong. I was so wrong about you. About everything." Robert tried to speak, but the words came out slurred, unintelligible. Eleanor translated, her voice breaking. "He says he's sorry, too. We both are. We were terrible parents to you. We see that now." I looked at them. These broken people who'd once seemed invincible in their certainty that I was insufficient, that I was a disappointment. "You told me you wished you had never had me," I reminded her, the words a raw wound. Eleanor sobbed harder, a guttural sound. "I didn't mean it. I was angry and stupid. And I've regretted those words every single day since. When you disappeared, when you blocked us and moved away, I understood. I deserved it. But it's killed me, not the cancer. Losing you is what's killing me." "You didn't lose me," I stated, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You threw me away." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I know I did. I was so focused on what I wanted you to be that I couldn't see who you were. You were always so smart, so passionate about your work. You were good and kind, and I treated you like you were worthless. I destroyed my relationship with my daughter because she wasn't the doll I'd imagined." Robert made more sounds, a mournful whimper. Eleanor nodded weakly. "He says he's proud of you. We looked you up online. We've been following your work. The Coastal Commission, the papers, the documentary. You are extraordinary. You became everything we should have helped you become, and you did it without us." I felt something twist in my chest, a phantom ache, but I wouldn't let it surface, wouldn't acknowledge the insidious pull of that long-denied validation. "Is that why you wanted to see me? To tell me you were wrong now that I've achieved the success you claimed I never would?" "No." Eleanor reached toward me with one skeletal hand, her fingers trembling. "I wanted to see you because you're my daughter and I love you. I've always loved you even when I was too broken to show it properly. I wanted to apologize before I die. I wanted you to know that every terrible thing I said was a lie I told myself because I was too proud and too stupid to accept that you were perfect exactly as you were." "I'm not perfect," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. "I'm just myself. That's what makes you perfect." She was crying steadily now, openly, desperately. "Please. I know I have no right to ask anything, but could you maybe visit again? Could we have some time before I die? I want to know you. The real you, not the daughter I tried to force you to be." I looked at Robert, who was also crying, tears running down the paralyzed side of his face. I looked at the small room with its cheap flowers and get well cards from Daniel and Chloe. I looked at the medical equipment keeping Eleanor alive, the fluids pumping chemicals into her veins that weren't working. They'd lost everything: money, health, status, security. The life they built on judgment and material success had crumbled, and in the ruins they'd found regret. "I don't know," I said finally, the words a weary sigh. "I don't know if I can do that." "I understand." Eleanor's voice was fading, weak. "But please know that I'm sorry, that I wish I could go back and be the mother you deserved. That you were always enough. You were always more than enough." I left without promising anything. I drove back to Carlsbad in silence, the ocean breeze a cold comfort. I walked on the beach until dark, the rhythmic crash of waves echoing the turmoil inside me. Alex was waiting when I got home, his face etched with concern. "How was it?" "Sad." I leaned against him, feeling utterly depleted. "She apologized. She says she's proud of me now. That she was wrong about everything." "How do you feel?" "Empty. Not satisfied. Not sad, just empty." He held me while I processed, eventually. "They want me to visit again," I whispered. "To have a relationship before she dies." "Do you want that?" "I don't know. Part of me feels like I should forgive them. They're suffering. She's dying. But forgiveness feels like erasing everything they did. Like saying it's okay that they damaged me for decades because they're sorry now." "Forgiveness isn't an eraser," Alex said quietly, his wisdom a balm. "It's just deciding that their damage doesn't control you anymore. You can forgive them without giving them access to you. You can acknowledge their regret without sacrificing your peace." I spent the next 3 days barely functional. I'd go through the motions at work, reviewing reports, attending meetings, responding to emails, but my mind was elsewhere, endlessly circling the wreckage of my past. Maya noticed. "You okay? You've been quiet." I told her everything, the whole sordid history, the recent phone call, the hospital visit, the agonizing indecision. She listened without judgment, then said something that shifted my perspective, settled something raw inside me. "When my grandfather was dying," she began, her voice soft, "he wanted to apologize for how he mistreated my mother when she was a child. He'd found religion, wanted forgiveness so he could die in peace. She refused to see him. Everyone called her heartless." Maya took a sip of her coffee, her gaze direct. "But you know what she told me? He wants absolution so he can feel better about himself. My peace requires him not being in my life. His deathbed doesn't erase decades of trauma, and his comfort isn't my responsibility." "What happened?" I asked, my voice hushed. "He died." She didn't go to the funeral. She slept better than she had in years because she chose herself over his need for redemption. Maya squeezed my hand, her touch firm. "You don't owe dying people forgiveness. You don't owe anyone access to you, regardless of their circumstances. If seeing them helps you heal, go. If it reopens wounds you've worked hard to close, stay away. But don't go out of obligation." This experience with her grandfather perfectly illustrates the critical distinction between forgiveness and reconciliation. While forgiveness is an internal, self-serving process of releasing resentment for one's own peace, reconciliation requires a mutual willingness to rebuild trust and redefine the relationship. It's crucial to understand that one can forgive internally without ever reconciling externally, especially when the relationship has been a consistent source of trauma and boundary violations. That conversation helped, truly, but it didn't make the decision easier. I thought about it for weeks, the decision a heavy stone in my gut. During that time, Daniel reached out through work channels, desperate, emotional emails begging me to visit our mother, describing her rapid decline, the pain, the profound regret that consumed her. He apologized too, for not standing up for me more, for being complicit in my erasure. Michael called twice more. Sharon sent a letter, thick with pleas. Even Chloe tried to reach me, saying Lily asked about me sometimes, the aunt she'd never met, the ghost of a relative. I received updates through these frantic, desperate channels. Eleanor's cancer was aggressive, she had maybe 3 months now. Robert had developed pneumonia from being bedridden, his breathing labored and shallow. Their medical debt was over $600,000. The house would be sold to cover it. Daniel was trying to rebuild the business, but it would take years. They'd built an empire on shifting sand, and it had swallowed them whole. I made my decision 2 months after that first hospital visit. I drove to San Jose on a Saturday morning, this time with purpose, a cold, hard clarity settling within me. The hospital room was more crowded. Daniel was there with Chloe and a now 10-year-old Lily, her wide eyes taking me in, a stranger she'd only vaguely heard about. Sharon sat beside Eleanor's bed. Robert looked worse, his breathing labored, rattling in his chest. They all looked up when I entered, a collective gasp. "Hi," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. Eleanor struggled to sit up, her gaze fixed on me. "You came back." "I did." I stayed near the door, keeping a careful distance. "I've thought a lot about everything. About what you said, what you did, all of it." "I'm so sorry," Eleanor whispered, tears already tracing paths down her face. I held up a hand, stopping her. "Let me finish. You spent my entire life making me feel inadequate. You compared me to Daniel constantly. You dismissed my passions, my career, my choices. You told me I was worthless. You said you wished you had never had me. Those things damaged me in ways I'm still working to heal." Eleanor was crying silently, her frail body shaking. Daniel looked at the floor, his face pale. "But you were right about one thing," I continued, my voice unwavering, strong. "I'm not the daughter you wanted. I never was. I'm better than that daughter. I'm someone who builds instead of destroying. I create value that isn't measured in dollars. I help endangered species survive. I educate future scientists. I contribute to something larger than myself." I took a deep, fortifying breath. "I came here to tell you that I've forgiven you." Eleanor sobbed, a guttural sound of relief. Robert made anguished, incoherent sounds. "I forgive you because carrying anger was hurting me, not you. I forgive you because I've built a life so good that your opinions of me don't matter anymore. I forgive you because you're small, broken people who couldn't see past your own limitations, and honestly, I feel sorry for you." "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile plea. "Thank you so much." But my voice was steady, clear. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I forgive you, but I won't have a relationship with you. I won't visit again. I won't pretend we're family. You had 28 years to know me, and you chose not to. I won't give you my last months just because you're dying. That ship sailed 4 years ago." "Please," Daniel said, his voice raw, pleading. "Please don't do this. She's our mother. She's your mother. She stopped being mine when she told me I shouldn't exist. You got the parents you needed. I didn't. That's not my fault. And it's not my responsibility to fix it at the end." I looked at Eleanor, really looked at her, at the hollowed-out shell of the woman who had once loomed so large over my life. "I hope your last months are peaceful. I hope you find whatever redemption you're looking for, but you'll find it without me." "I understand." Eleanor's voice was barely audible, a thin thread of sound. "I understand, but please, could you tell me about your life? Just a little, so I can die knowing who you became." I considered leaving, the urge strong, powerful, but something, a flicker of something close to pity, made me stay. Made me talk for 15 minutes about my work, my husband, my house by the ocean. I told them about leading the Coastal Commission, about testifying before Congress, about the documentary that had reached millions of people. I told them I was happy. Eleanor listened with her eyes closed, tears still streaming down her face, crying quietly. When I finished, she said, "I'm so proud of you. I know I have no right to be, but I am. You're exactly what the world needs." "Goodbye," I said. I walked out and didn't look back. Daniel followed me to the parking lot, his steps heavy. "How can you be so cold?" His voice was accusatory, laced with anger and confusion. "She's dying." "I know." I unlocked my car. "I'm not cold. I'm protecting myself from people who hurt me repeatedly." She apologized. Apologies don't erase damage. They don't entitle her to my presence or my forgiveness or my time. She made choices for nearly 3 decades. I'm making mine now. "What about Dad?" "He can barely speak, but he's trying. He wants to know you. He should have wanted that when I was 12. When I was 16. When I was 25. Not now. When it's convenient for him." Daniel's face hardened, contorted in anger. "You're punishing sick people. That makes you just as bad as you think they were." "No," I met his eyes, my gaze steady, unblinking. "I'm refusing to set myself on fire to keep them warm. There's a difference. You stay if you want. You be the good child who sacrifices everything. I'm going home to my husband and my work and my life. The life I built without them. The life they said I'd never have." I drove away, leaving him standing alone in the vast, empty parking lot, a solitary figure looking lost and broken in my rearview mirror. Eleanor died 6 weeks later. Sharon called to tell me. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't attend the funeral. I sent no flowers, no card, no acknowledgement. Robert died 3 months after that. Same response. Daniel tried to reach out several times over the following year, a desperate flurry of calls and emails. I never responded. As far as I was concerned, I had no family in San Jose. But I had family. Alex and I adopted a daughter from foster care when I was 35. A brilliant 8-year-old named Jasmine who loved science and asked endless questions about marine ecosystems. We gave her the childhood I'd wished for: support, encouragement, unconditional love, a secure foundation. At 37, I was appointed to lead California's new Climate Resilience Initiative, a $50 million program coordinating coastal adaptation strategies statewide. The governor mentioned me by name in a press conference. National media covered the story. One article mentioned my background: doctor, narrator's name, placeholder, from UC Santa Cruz, decorated researcher, policy expert. No mention of family. I'd made sure of that. My work has been cited in Supreme Court cases about environmental protection. Students travel across the country to work with me. I've testified before the United Nations on coastal conservation. My salary is more than Robert made in his best years. I never think about whether Eleanor and Robert saw any of this before they died. Their approval stopped mattering the day I walked away. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty, if I should have given them the deathbed reconciliation they wanted, if forgiveness should have looked different, softer, more merciful. But then I come home to Jasmine showing me her science project, her face alight with excitement, to Alex planning our next field research trip, our shared purpose a quiet hum between us, to the view of the ocean I've worked so hard to protect. I see the life I built from nothing, with no help, no foundation from the people who should have been my strongest support. And I know I made the right choice. They wanted me to stop existing. So I did, for them. And in that absence, I became more than they ever imagined possible. The daughter they didn't want became the woman they could never be. Someone who builds instead of destroys. Who creates value that outlasts any bank account. Who chose meaning over money and, in doing so, found both. I don't need their posthumous pride. I don't need their deathbed apologies. I don't need anything from them. I have everything I need. I built it myself. What would you have done in my shoes? Is there a point where self-preservation must override the social expectation of familial forgiveness, even in the face of death?